John, Pat McAfee is on the verge of walking away from $120 million and into the arms of ESPN.
And Andrew, what's up with Tom Brady and you and the pod? Plus, we'll have some Pac-12 info on the Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast.
I would like to give an update, though, for people.
Yes. Okay.
A lot of massive news coming out of this particular operation.
Hey.
Probably in like the next 10 days.
And we're back. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for the New York Post. He's John Ourand, the media reporter for the Sports Business Journal. And John, let's get right to it. Who's up? Who's down?
Who's up? Who's down?
Well, I'll take it, Andrew. My who's up is Kevin Cross. He's the head of NBC Sports Chicago, the regional sports network that's in Chicago. And I almost picked Jimmy Pitaro of ESPN or Luis Silverwasser of Turner, anybody that has an NHL deal or an association with the Chicago Blackhawks. And that's because the Blackhawks won the NHL draft lottery, and they're on pace to pick somebody called Connor Bedard, who's a player who's been described as a once-in-a-generation talent. You know, I live in the D.C. market, and I've seen what a once-in-a-generation talent can do for an NHL team. The Capitals picked Alexander Ovechkin in 2004. He started with the team in 2005. Since then, the team has been good. Ratings have been good. Capital One Arena has been filled. They don't need that really in the Chicago market. But it's really more than just locally. Chicago, the third biggest media market. And I'm always struck, I know the NHL and NFL are totally different sports, but every time the Bears do well, you see the NFL ratings increase across the board. And that's something that TV executives have always pointed to as a market that's as important to viewership and to ratings as the New York market. And getting a team there in the NHL at the start of this long-term media deal that they're on is something that's going to bear watching.
John, my who's up is Eduardo Perez, Sunday Night Baseball analyst for ESPN. And why? A simple apology. That's why. On Sunday night, Mookie Betts hit a game-tying 2-out homer in the ninth inning. They showed a picture of Fernando Tatis Jr., and Perez said, "That's what a superstar looks like, Nando, Mookie Betts." When he says Nando, he's referring to Tatis Jr. Just didn't really seem like he needed to take a shot. Of course, Tatis got in trouble last year, 80-game suspension for using performance-enhancing drugs. And Perez is known as one of the nicest guys in baseball. And it's not that you can't do that. It came on the screen. He explained it on Sirius XM, where he has a show with Steve Phillips that they do daily on MLB Network on Sirius. And this is what he said.
I cringed and I'm going, dang, that sounded terrible. So not only am I going to, and this is the first time I talk about it now, but this is one that I'll have to also apologize to the player because that's not right. And that wasn't, and I did not, and that's not who I am, and that's not how I sound professionally on air. If it's on radio or not, try to always come through, and there was no reason to make it singled out that way.
And the reason I like that is that we all make mistakes. We sometimes say something you don't mean to say, obviously within reason. I believe an apology should be accepted. And he was quick to say, you know what, I messed up. I'm going to apologize to Tatis, and he's going to make amends. So to me, that's a who's up for Eduardo Perez.
All right, I would go with our who's down. I'm going to go to Pete Pavakla of NBC. Of course, I was on Twitter on Sunday talking to TV Sports Ratings, saying that if the Orioles had won on NBC on Sunday morning, he'd be my who's up. But he's my who's down, and he's my who's down because of the Kentucky Derby, and it has almost nothing to do with viewership, which was down 8%. It's more the headlines coming out of the race that were just awful. 7 horses died in the run-up to the race, 7. And the headlines from mainstream outlets and other outlets were pretty devastating. AP had a column headlined "Stench of Death Overwhelms Kentucky Derby." AP also had a news story, the AP, saying, "In the shadow of 7 horse deaths, the party goes on at the Derby." The New York Times had a headline, "The humans failed the horses again." Vox had a headline saying, "The horse racing industry is egregiously cruel and we should end it yesterday." So NBC has the rights to the race through 2025. And by all accounts, they love it. They want to keep it. I expect that they will. They've had it since 2001. Next year, they're going to blow it out. It's going to be the 150th running of the Kentucky Derby. So you're going to see a ton of marketing around it. But it is awfully difficult to hide from that storyline and those headlines that came out of this year's race.
John, for my who's down, I had trouble this week. Everyone must be doing such a good job in sports media. I had a little trouble finding a who's down. So I'm going with the Pac-12. The reasoning will be more apparent later in the show when it's one of our topics, but I don't like their positioning of where they are with their TV deals as far as I can tell. Now, we don't know everything. We'll have some information later. And it's the things I'm hearing about where, things are possible. I just don't know if they get to that Big 12 number. They still might with ESPN and Fox, but I really don't like their outlook right now. So they have my who's down, and we're going to make it list a little bit longer to find out why, in terms of some information. We both have done some reporting on that in the Pac-12. So we'll get to that. This is about the fifth topic or so, but let's get to the topics.
Andrew, in the trade, we call that a teaser. That was well done.
There we go. The other thing I like about, before we get to the topics, the other thing I like, you do a podcast for a while, and you kind of hear people's things that they do, like in terms of like their personality and their verbal tics and stuff. And something that I really enjoy, I don't know if the audience does, but like when you mentioned Connor Bedard, you said somebody called Connor Bedard. And you do that sometimes you say a guy goes by the name of, I love it. I don't know. It sounds like an old Western or something.
You know what? I don't want to come off as an on-ice expert. I don't know if he's any good, but people say he's good.
Well, let me tell you a media trick. You're supposed to fake it in those circumstances. Not go, somebody goes by the name of Connor Bedard.
This is the most authentic pod in the business right now. All right, well, let's go to the topics. First topic, Andrew, you added a story break on Tuesday about Pat McAfee. You mentioned it in the opening. It looks like he is going to ditch one of the most lucrative deals. I mean, it was a deal that took up several topics last year when he first signed it on this pod, and he's going to turn away from that and go to ESPN. What do you know?
So what I wrote was ESPN is the leading candidate. All signs point to ESPN. He is in the midst of a $120 million plus dollar deal with FanDuel, only the second year. What makes Pat McAfee great is that he trusts himself, he trusts his gut, and he goes with what he wants. Now, most people, I think, if they were, had a deal, they compensate. It's not that he just gets the $30 million, it's going to pay his guys, production, all that stuff. They would just stick with that. But he was unhappy. He hasn't really said fully why with FanDuel. And he also said that he wants someone else to handle, the other stuff that comes along with doing a show, not just the performance part of it. FanDuel didn't really have that. He needed a network, a platform to do that. ESPN's obviously perfect in terms of being able to handle that. So it's not done yet. I'm told no deal is official yet. I will mention, though, he did take a picture of Bob Iger that he put on Twitter a couple weeks back, maybe a week and a half ago. And then on Monday, McAfee said that he expects to announce something within 10 days or so. Well, next Tuesday is Disney's upfronts. So all signs point there. I do think there'll be a linear component where he'll probably be on TV, but I think I think a lot of his show very likely will stay on YouTube as well.
And of course, he is on College Game Day, and he has an established relationship with ESPN already. But this actually reminds me back in the day when every single team was looking into creating their own regional sports network. And it was like, why don't we create value and do that? And if I was advising those teams, I would have been like, why don't you just sit back and collect money from somebody like Fox or Comcast who know how to do this? And you don't have to go, and it's hard to build up a media company. And it's hard to, what he's realizing is that it is time consuming and difficult to set up your own production company and oversee that production while being the star talent of your new company there.
Yeah, there's only so many hours in the day. And, I think, a lot of times when you have like your friends involved, sometimes they're not good. I think his friends are talented too. I think there could be some expansion in terms of their roles, perhaps with ESPN in terms of what they do. So they could kind of go out a little bit, maybe. Obviously, the core will still be the show, but where they could do their own thing a little bit more. So there could be growth for them as well. McAfee's bounced around though. He's different, right? He started at Barstool. He retired as a Pro Bowler. And walked away from millions with the Colts because I don't think he liked the GM. I think that was the big reason why. And he wanted to go into media, took a huge chance on himself, went to Barstool. They recognized his ability, left Barstool. And I can't even count all the places he's been already, from DAZN to, was he on Westward One at one point, or was it iHeartRadio, one or the other, where he had to syndicate. He was on Sirius XM, WWE. He was on Fridays. Then he went to Game Day. I'm probably missing a couple here, but he's done a lot of deals. He's moved around a lot. Here's the other thing that when you talk about ESPN and Disney, Bob Iger announced in February 7,000 jobs will be lost. When ESPN looks at this deal, they say, if they do it, this is going to pencil out, that they're going to make money on the deal. That's the only way they would do it. So maybe one doesn't have something to do with the other, but optically, that it just doesn't feel good, right? For people who are laid off, for people who still work there, who are dealing with morale of layoffs. And I get it. You could argue it's in two separate buckets, but the thing about all this stuff is that there's human beings involved. And so it's easy to say, well, this is business, is not, but if you work there, it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to swallow. It's nothing to do with Pat McAfee. He's doing nothing wrong. And maybe Disney and ESPN, and the leaders there are not doing anything wrong, but it's just optically, it's tough.
Pat McAfee, he's one of the most unique people that I've covered, because at every point, if he had asked me for advice, I would have given him the exact opposite advice that he took. And look where he's gone. Like, he's bet on himself consistently. He's gone the non-traditional route, and now he's going back to the main route. And I'm not even certain that ESPN's going to make money off of this deal, but I am certain that Pat McAfee is going to bring in a younger core demographic that they're hoping will come into McAfee and then stick around to watch, the other sports and other shows that are on the air.
Well, they want to be cool. They're, like you look at ESPN.
I want to be cool, Andrew.
Exactly. And what year were you born in? ESPN was born in 1979. So now it's in its mid 40s. And so it's hard to maintain being cool when you're in your mid 40s. Some of us do it. Maybe we're even a little more than mid 40s. But the bottom line is it's hard to do that. But I think when they look at their front facing people now, led by Stephen A., I still think you got Joe Buck and Aikman, you got the Mannings, you got Scott Van Pelt, Greenberg. But to me, ESPN though is the warriors who work warriors who work hard and grind. To me, that's what makes ESPN. So those people shouldn't be forgotten, in my opinion. I'm not saying they are, but I think sometimes when you have layoffs, they are. But McAfee, is definitely designed to be cooler. Definitely designed. And how it works out, that will be fascinating to watch. If it does, in fact, it's not official yet. So I was told nothing's signed yet, so we'll see where it goes from there. But I do think those upfronts, I would put a little circle around the upfronts next Tuesday. I think we'll both be at.
All right, let's go to topic 2. The NFL, outside of the live games, they have the NFL draft, they have the NFL combine, and they have probably my favorite, which is the NFL schedule release. They have a primetime show.
Hold on. So you go schedule release, and then what's 2?
I'll take the draft too.
Draft 2 and then combine.
The draft.
I would go.
Combine.
I'd probably go draft, schedule, combine. So yeah, I guess I got the schedule up there a little higher than the combine. All right, fair enough.
Well, there were some hiccups this year going into the schedule release. They had it planned for Thursday, the day after our pod posts, and Peter King came out with his Monday morning quarterback saying that they might not make Thursday because there are some problems in terms of they couldn't get a lot of the big games set. There was a lot of lobbying by all the networks and by Amazon, of course, to try to get the best games, more so this year than in past years. They finally, late on Monday, came up with the schedule. Roger Goodell took a look at it. He gave it his blessing. Everything is on schedule for a Thursday release. And there are a couple of new interesting things that I'm going to be looking for in the release. One is Christmas Day is going to be a triple header on Monday. It's going to be CBS, Fox, and ESPN going. This is the NFL going head to head with what has been traditionally an NBA day. And so that's the type of games that they put on Christmas Day is something that is going to interest me. Also, ESPN this year is going to have 3 weeks where they're going to have 2 games sort of side by side, one on ABC, one on ESPN. How are they going to schedule those games? Are they going to be sort of top tier games, or are they going to be lesser games? I think that's something that's that I'm especially looking forward to. And also, if you grew up with the NFL, you knew like the Cowboys playing against the AFC at an AFC stadium would be on Fox, or a Commanders Eagles game would be on Fox. Now, none of that necessarily matters anymore. There's still an AFC package and there's still an NFC package. So Fox still has a minimum number of Cowboys games that they're by contract going to get, and the CBS has a minimum number of Chiefs games that by contract they're going to get as well. But what those games could be, they're sort of all over the place. So that made creating the schedule a lot more difficult, because you didn't just look at it and say, oh, well, obviously that's a Fox game because it's Eagles Giants.
The NFL's also made like the idea of putting together the schedule into like, I don't know, there's so many stories on it, and they have their full court press with it. So good for them with that. I mean, look, I would say where Aaron Rodgers, with the effect of the Jets, and how many times will they be in prime time? Will they or will they not? They play the Cowboys. Will that be Thanksgiving? Giants, Jets play each other. So the interesting stories there. My question for you is flex scheduling and Monday Night Football. How much impact do you think that will have? I think it's the last 4 weeks they can do it. Do you think 1-2 times? How many times do you think they use that?
So it's weeks 12 through 17.
Okay.
They need to give a 12-day notice. And, I looked over last year's Monday night schedule from week 12 to 17. There was maybe 2, probably just 1 game that would have been flexed out. Remember, flexible scheduling isn't about getting the best game on Monday night. It's about taking a dog of a game. So in a week 16 game, if you have 2 teams that are well under 500, the NFL doesn't want that game in a prime time window. It wants that game in a 1 o'clock window on a Sunday. Flexible scheduling, we also saw that with Amazon. It makes a ton of headlines. There are people that are going to be really disenfranchised because I bought a ticket for a game on Sunday, and now you're telling me 12 days beforehand that it's now going to be on a Monday night. That it's not fan friendly, but it's going to happen maybe 1 time a season, maybe twice at most. I don't see it happening much more than that.
Right. The biggest teams right now, it's always the Cowboys, right? And then the Chiefs with Mahomes and being the Super Bowl champions. Those, I think, would be the ones that they were probably doing the most politicking for. But what else?
That's what surprised me. I talked to several executives, and they identified those 2 teams, the Cowboys, who haven't won the Super Bowl since 1995, incredible, and the Chiefs. They said there's really nobody else. There's another grouping of teams, and 1 or 2 of those teams are going to get into that upper grouping that the NFL likes, where they get big ratings and they get the prime telecast. The Eagles, the Super Bowl runner-up, is one. Your Steelers have a chance to do that as well. Aaron Rodgers and the Jets is somebody that they're keeping a look at. There are a bunch of young quarterbacks in Cincinnati and in Buffalo. They just haven't really won anything yet, so they're sort of in that second grouping in terms of how the TV executives are taking a look at it, and not in the top grouping. So that's something also to take a look at to see how the season develops and what team catches fire to catapult itself up into that top grouping. But one person that you're not going to see next year, Andrew, is Tom Brady.
Are you sure?
You created. Let's go to topic 3. Yeah, can we get the Tom Brady Meter soundtrack, Chris Mason? You created some international news on the pod last week, and I wished I'm usually a news hound. I can usually sniff this stuff out. I was surprised. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really news. We are having some fun. Tom Brady, I do think, there's a question of if he'll do it next year. I mean, that's clear. I've said that before. I've written it before. Joe Buck said it. Others have opined. I think Phil Simms also opined about that. And so that's not necessarily new. A couple of people told me, who know people close to Brady, who said like one person told them they think they'll do it, one person doesn't think he'll do it. So I do think it's in question, but bottom line, it's he hasn't decided anything. He probably doesn't know for sure. Look, I go back and forth. Like I said last week, it fluctuates, but internet got a hold of it. It got aggregated. It got changed slightly.
Hang on for a second. So now I want to interview you on this. Okay. So when you say the internet got a hold of it, like, what do you mean?
Well, the way I could tell, awful announcing, they aggregate a lot of stuff, and they first did it and they handled it fine. There's no real issue with that. And then I guess another couple other sites maybe had it. And then there's a influential tweeter named Dove Kleiman. He got it. He wrote report and then : Tom Brady could quit. And then he put my words in accurately, but that kind of got it going. And these are the sites, the bigger sites that Bleacher Report and Sports Illustrated took it. And so all of a sudden it gained steam. I saw it gaining steam at that point. Like I was contacted by SiriusXM to go on the radio with Robin Lundberg, who I've known for a long time, who I like a lot. And I said, I love Robin, but I'm going to pass because this isn't really a story. It's gotten into the aggregation machine. So I passed on that because I didn't want to add to it. But then on Friday, Tom Brady chimed in on Instagram saying fake news. Okay, so at that point, I talked to my editor who felt the need to address the situation, and I did. You can find my column online. When he says that, you kind of have to, explain what happened because I didn't report anything. I reported stuff I knew. And here's the difference. And it's hard to explain this. It's nuanced a little bit, but if I have news, I'm going to write news on Twitter. We're going to have a story. We had no story. We had no news on Twitter. People in the business who heard it, nobody was like, I can't believe you reported that. Nobody said that. And so this is how these things work now. I've seen it happen many times with a lot of things. I mean, and people listening who are at networks, they deal with it all the time, where things are slightly changed. And there's nothing you can play. Look, at the end of the day, to me, it's a compliment that people listen to this podcast and take what we say, and it has some level of importance that they repeat that. In this case, though, it did cause a little bit of a stir, and it wasn't intended. We were just having fun with that's something that we'll see. We're gonna have to be careful, though. It does fluctuate but it's my mind. So the difference is that it's not Tom Brady told me it's 51-49 now. Those are my thoughts that it went from 50. And here's the thing. I could have said 50-50, but look, I've been trained.
50-50.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear 50-50.
The Mando
I've been doing this a
podcast
long time.
never
You
have
gotta
a 50-50.
figure out how to do that.
I want to go inside the Brady meter for at the podcast. So we have it as the podcast has it at 49-51 that he's not going to do it. When he came and said that was fake news, did that move the odds at all?
I mean, it kind of makes it feel like he's going to do it more. I think that's, if he's going off of what those aggregations were saying. But I don't know. I think
we're sticking at 49. We're sticking at 49.
At the moment, it fluctuates. I easily could have gone 51 last week and there would have been nothing. If I had done it the opposite, we could have avoided a headache. I would have had more time on my Friday. But yeah, so I go back and forth. Look, I think he very well could do it. As I said last week, it's so much money. I think he could try it for a year. Is he going to do it forever? I don't know. But I also think I'm just going, I don't know Tom Brady. This is what people I talk with. I think he's very interested in being with his kids. I think that's hard, even if you're going private. Even if you flew out on a Saturday and fly back on a Sunday, it's a late game. To do the job correctly, you probably want to get there maybe even Friday night. This is national TV. And, he's a guy who wants to be received well. I just think you're going to have to put in the work. I mentioned Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, and, there's a lot of people in the business who don't think they should go in day of game. But I would point out that the broadcast sounded great last year. So is there a problem? It's not maybe ideal. Once the broadcast doesn't sound as good, then you can point to that. When the broadcast sounds good, then, you probably maybe don't change the producer and director as well. But, Monday Night Football had a good broadcast last year. So, but if you're a rookie, I think you kind of want to be there.
Let's start talking about an NFL announcer that actually is going to be in the booth next year. and that is Chris Fowler, ESPN's top play-by-play college football announcer. He's going to call 5 games for ESPN, NFL games. They moved Steve Levy, who used to be the lead NFL play-by-player for ESPN. They moved him off of the NFL, inserted Chris Fowler. I know you didn't love that move. I didn't mind it so much. I think Fowler is is somebody that internally at ESPN, he's well liked, he's well respected, and ESPN's offices, they looked at for years when Monday Night Football couldn't find its footing and the NFL was getting increasingly frustrated by why can't you produce it well? They would look at the college football telecast and be like, we want it produced like what you do with Fowler and Herbstreit.
Okay, well, I called it odd, and this is why. Okay, number one, if I'm ESPN, the first thing I'd want to do with that position is create a new star, because Joe Buck's contract is going to come up in 4 years. It's going to be during a Super Bowl year, and I would like to create a little leverage if I can. Now, you're going to want to keep Joe Buck, most likely, but if he asks for $20 million, you'd rather be able to say, I have Adam Amin, who's ready to go. People love Adam Amin, and maybe you keep him at 15 or so. That's number one. And you're not doing that with Fowler, because you thought so much more of Joe Buck than Chris Fowler on the NFL that you decided to pay Joe Buck $50 million a year instead of just having Fowler do the job, which you could have gotten him for a raise, but much less than $15 million a year. So you decide not to do that. And you have other college announcers who could be the number one play-by-play guy, led by Sean McDonough. I know they could maybe go with Reese Davis. They have others like Pash and Rashusin. They got some guys there. But they chose not to do that. That's number one. Number two, I don't think Fowler's a great play-by-player. I think this will be interesting to see how he does. Chemistry is important. And, I know this is only 5 games, but just to throw people together for 5 games is difficult, to know for them to have their footing. When he works at Herbstreit, it's one of the best game analysts there is going, especially in college. He was okay on Amazon, the NFL, wasn't amazing, but on college, he's excellent. I think hands down the best. I think that's going to hurt them. And I just think also ESPN has to also learn how to develop their younger people, so they're not leaving. They at one point they had Joe Davis. At one point they had Jason Benetti. At one point they had Adam Amin. They are all now at Fox. This is a spot where I'd want to do that. I think the NFL does like Fowler, but I also think it's more difficult to just throw people together than they necessarily think. And I don't think, especially if you're not at the top of the game, and I think we have to listen to it. Maybe it'll be really good. And I just don't think you're creating any leverage. And so I would not have done that. I found it odd.
Yeah, and you made that point well. And I will say that the ESPN does have a lot of young talent. They have a lot of college football. They have a lot of college basketball. They have a lot of young talent getting a lot of reps who don't have the big sort of established names. I think the problem that they had of the Joe Davis and, you gave that whole list of Adam Amin, of people that went to Fox, that hasn't happened in a couple of years. Like
you have to recognize their ability. Like they have Ryan Ruocco, who's still younger, on the NBA, and they have some up and coming younger guys like Mike Monaco. But you have to give those people chances, and you want them to grow within your realm and not just be a breeding ground. I mean, Fox has plucked 3 of the better play-by-players. NBC, Fox had Noah Eagle as well. He now at NBC. So again, ESPN should be those places. Now, ESPN would argue, well, when they're on our air, they don't get the best. I would disagree. I think if they put those guys and gave them opportunities, it's the ability also to recognize what you have. You got to be able to scout yourself. And so that's very important. All right, let's move on. I mentioned Ruocco. He's done some NBA, there's an example. They should give him probably some more NBA playoff games. But NBA playoffs, you get a story, ESPN not traveling for the conference final. What do you think about that?
Budget cuts that we're seeing. I think ESPN wants to. I think they have plans to do it in the future. But I think as you were saying earlier about bringing over McAfee, having a big expense like traveling the pre and post game show to the stadiums during the conference finals while you're laying people off is not the best look. ESPN does plan to travel to the NBA finals, But this is the first time in at least a decade, I haven't even gone back to figure it out, that they're not doing it. And it's going to be quite a contrast to Turner, because TNT, you know, their NBA contract, they have go up into a conference final, and they're inside the NBA, which already outshines anything that ESPN puts on the air with the NBA, is going to be at the event. It's going to make it feel bigger. It's something that, you know, the league office really likes to see as well. And it's just where ESPN is right now, just in terms of the budget and the budget cuts.
They will be there at the finals, though, correct?
They will be there at the final. Well, right now that's the plan. Yeah.
So you're saying might not be at the finals?
No, everything I've been told says that they'll be at the finals. Yeah. I don't know why it said that. I'm trying to.
They will be at the finals. You
I don't know.
kind of said, "All right, that's the plan." It's like, all right, sound like an executive saying, "All right, that's the plan," and then we changed. I just said it was the plan. I didn't say it was happening. I said it was the plan.
Andrew, you mentioned this in your Who's Down. Our next topic is the Pac-12. Take us a little bit more in depth what you're hearing.
One name that as a possibility that's been out there a lot is Amazon. I think that's very unlikely. I never say never about it, but from what I'm told, very unlikely the Pac-12 and Amazon.
Very unlikely in terms of what, like
a deal at all.
Like no Friday night game or no Thursday night
very
game.
Unlikely. Again, not saying impossible. I'm saying very unlikely, at least at this point. Maybe things change, but I just don't think there's a match. As we talked about last week, and you reported about Amazon and NASCAR, that sounds like that could very well happen for that summer series. They want the NBA. I think they're saving up for that. They really want premium sports, you know, top of the line exclusive stuff. NASCAR falls into that. Obviously, Thursday night football, the Yankees. You can see obviously what they're doing overseas. They have a lot of Premier League and Champions League. They went hard for that Champions League before CBS and Paramount kept it. So that's what their plans look like. Again, not saying impossible. I'm saying very unlikely.
The thing about Amazon and their sports strategy is that you talked about exclusivity. If you want to watch the NFL on Thursday night, there's only one place that you can watch it, and that's Amazon Prime. The NASCAR deal that they seem likely to get, the only place that you're going to be able to see those races and really any NASCAR races during that time is going to be on most Amazon if they get that deal done. With the Pac-12, how much college football is out there, and then sort of not being able to get the top game, and they're not a tonnage play. Amazon has never been, we'll take everything and try to figure that out. It was tough to start with.
And I think when you look at it, I would say, let's use a baseball analogy. The Thursday night football is a grand slam. NASCAR is probably a solo homer, right? But you look at the Pac-12, at least right now, and what you just said in terms of not really having exclusivity. Maybe you could put a Friday night game on, but if you're not giving them the best game of the week, does Amazon really want that? So is that a double? Is it a single? Is it a triple with all that other college football on? You look at it kind of like the Apple deal with Major League Baseball. It's an exclusive deal for those games, but there's a million other games on. And it's a regional sport. College football is a national sport, but it's regionalized. And so it just doesn't fit. I'd be very surprised at this point. So Amazon. And so let's go down. What do you think on ESPN?
Well, there were some reports out there that ESPN was out as well. I don't think that's true. I think that ESPN, they're not chasing after the Pac-12. But if there's something opportunistic that presents itself, they're gonna grab it. So the ESPN is available. They're talking pretty regularly to the Pac-12, and if they're able to get a deal, that'll work out. We've had Eric Shanks on this podcast over at Fox. I've talked to him for another story that I did in SBJ Media newsletter as well. He says the same thing. They want to be, they'll be opportunistic if something comes up.
That's probably not great for the Pac-12 if everyone's just looking at it as an opportunity to make a good deal. If they're going to try to match the Big 12 and not have teams like possibly Colorado and others leave. their conference. So
Yeah, here's
again,
the thing,
good
though,
change.
Andrew, is that the Pac-12, the Washington State athletic director came out and said, like, they have a really good deal that's out there. I just don't know who that deal is with.
But they've been saying this forever. Like, again, I have no side in this. I mean, I hope all the conferences survive and all the universities do well and everyone's happy. So I have no side in this, but I will say that they've said a number of things that have not turned out to be true. I mean, if you're just watching on the record comments from the commissioner saying that, they're going to be more lucrative or more successful than the Big Ten, which hard to fathom, and also UCLA and USC were making a mistake going to the Big Ten. Those are weird. And then they put all kinds of deadlines you hear over and over. And you do get the sense that some of these schools, they're waiting. They want to see what the offers are and then go from there. I do think also the other thing is my last point on the Pac-12 is that if you do, like, they kind of got in this hole because of the Pac-12 network. Right. That was such a disaster that now they're in a hole. And once you get in this hole, in this rut, it's hard to get out of it, because while other conferences or other leagues are moving up in terms of how much they're being paid, how much exposure, if you keep moving back, at some point, you just can't make up that ground, especially where prestige and how you're looked upon is so important in something like college athletics. And I think that's where they're falling into trouble. And that's why, like, we had Nick Khan on at a WWE, who said if he were them, he'd take a shorter term deal and get exposure. Maybe that's what happens with ESPN, where it's not as lucrative. They can keep the league together and they go for 3 years and then go from there and then try to get back into the market.
Yeah, to me, the problem with the Pac-12 is a matter of timing. Like, if they came to market even just like a year earlier, like it was a frothier market. There weren't cost cuttings. You weren't seeing layoffs happening across the board. And so I think that plays a big part of it. And there were also some mistakes. Like, there was a deal for them to do that the Big 12 came in and took. So,
but we were the first to report, I said this on our podcast about them being hundreds of millions of dollars apart. This is months and months and months ago. And that was the problem, that they wanted so much. They thought that, because the Big Ten, got so much money that raised what they got. But really the networks looked at it like the Big Ten got this much money, so that's less money for you to get. Like, not that this is their equals and that this is like the going rate. No, it was more of, we're going to spend this amount of money in total. And so this much is going to the Big Ten.
We talk a lot about need to have programming and nice to have programming. And the Pac-12 hasn't been able yet to convince the TV networks that it's need to have programming. There is another interesting deal that's coming up at Sports Business Journal. We interviewed Kathy Engelberg, who is the commissioner of the WNBA. And she was talking about the rights deal moving forward. And she said that the WNBA is undervalued right now. And as she looks around and sees these other leagues and conferences doubling what they get, she's like, well, that's a minimum. That's a floor for what the WNBA should expect. And so she's doing this as the Pac-12 is struggling. I'm not ready to predict yet, make any predictions yet about the WNBA, but I can tell you that is somewhere that I'm looking, because there's an unmistakable trend that we've talked about towards women's sports and networks doubling down on women's sports. There is a viewership story that the WNBA has that's pretty good, showing consistent ratings gains over the year. Where that falls in terms of being able to double the rights fee or not is going to be a really interesting storyline for us to cover going forward.
I think that the WNBA has a really good future. And if I were networks, there are two things. If I were networks, I'd be wanting to be partners with the WNBA. I'm going to tell you why. I think Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, that set something off. I mean, first starting with Caitlin Clark, because she just plays different. It's so entertaining to watch. And it's not going to matter if she's on Iowa or if she's on the Mystics. That it's going to be something that's really fun to watch. I think her rivalry with Angel Reese is something that, I'm not saying it's bird magic, but there's something there. I think it's going to be on the upswing. Now, if I'm them, I want exposure. And I understand everyone wants the money right away. And she might be right. Maybe they can double, maybe they can triple, maybe they get a lot more money. And obviously you want the money. Don't get me wrong. But I think, they did a deal with Ion for Friday night games on local broadcast channels. I don't know if those will do well. You just want your games available. Let people see this product, especially as it's about to become even more interesting next year, when Reese comes out, when Clark comes out, when they potentially have another fun NCAA tournament run that, if all goes right, they meet. If they met in the finals or the Final Four or someplace, that would be tremendous. Then you have from UConn, Paige Beckers, who's going to become another household name, I think. And everyone will know how to pronounce her name when you add her to the mix. I mean, she was tremendous the year before, then hurt her knee. She'll be back. And so I just think you look at all that, it's a rising tide. So I think, look, they should get as much money as they can, of course. But I do think that the WNBA is having a moment, and it's not here yet. It's on the horizon, off of college basketball, which is how it worked with the NBA. And I think they're in really well positioned.
Well, that brings us to the end of another action-packed Mando podcast, Marchand and Ourand Sports Media podcast. We've gone without a big get for several weeks in a row. We're going to have a few coming in the next couple of weeks that I think are big gets, so that should be a lot of fun. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please go rate. 5-star ratings are great. Leave a comment as well. We're told those help. Thank you very much for listening.
And also thanks to Chris Mason and AC Wyatt for putting it all together. And then the new segment, I don't know if you guys heard it last week. You stay on. You might have thought something was wrong, but we have a new segment basically. For this one, we'll call it, is it Beckers, Buckers, or Bloopers? Thanks, everybody. Jeez, I'm off tonight. This dog is barking. Give me 1 second if you don't mind. You guys might not hear it, but
oh my God, you're talent. Now you're officially talent.
I'm going to apologize to it's like a tongue twister. Apologize to Tatis.
It's Beckers, I think, right?
Wait, let me see.
You're saying Buckners. It's Beckers.
And then you have Paige Buckers.
Again, it's Beckers, not Buckers.
Beckers, all right. And then at Connecticut, you have Paige Buckers. Paige Buckers. She's from UConn. She's coming back. And so, still wrong?
It's Beckers.
Beckers. All right.
Yes.